Hey y'all.
Hello.
Hey there.
Just Julie, I predicted right. Amy just sent me the social equities thing, so I'm adding them to the mural right now.
Hey, you guys.
Hey,
How
Madeline. Hey, Ron. Maddie, did the co-chairs of the subcommittee say who wanted to lead, like for the breakouts?
A couple of them did. A couple of them said they have no preference, so I'll set that up.
All right, great.
I'm gonna leave. What I'm gonna do is leave one of them in, and then divide them up.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Ron, do you have superheroes up on your bookshelf?
I've got no other than the Intel guy, and of
Okay.
course Baby Yoda.
Okay.
I got Baby Yoda, and Einstein is up there twice, and Worf somewhere.
Baby Yoda's up in space right now.
Yeah, I saw that. That's so cute. I'm a Star Trek person. My wife wondered why am I engaged at all with something in the Star Wars franchise, but I got Disney Plus for her so they could see Hamilton.
Mm.
And of course, this is in the house. I said, man, see what else is on here. And I bumped into that thing. I said, what in the devil is a Mandalorian? And now I'm hooked. I'm hooked now.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's addictive.
So I don't need to watch it now.
Well, you can sit down one day when you're bored and you stream the whole series. You know, that's the thing about streaming
Bored?
services.
Bored?
Well, that's a bizarre concept. I know. I have it on when I'm working sometimes
I
to
hear you.
keep track of time.
I do want one of those days where I can just lay around all day and do nothing but watch television. I think that would be a fun day. I need to watch The Crown.
Well, my wife might make me watch that one. I ended up in Kite, Georgia Sunday, and it wasn't my plan. A client called from Charlotte and said, "Can you meet me at Kite?" I said, "Okay, where's that at?" And it was Kite, Georgia.
Oh.
There's some property they wanted to acquire. And I said, "Oh, okay." Y'all know how much I charge. I'll go right down
there. Hey, David.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
David, are you at the convention center in case anyone shows up, or are we good with that now?
I hope we're good with that now. We didn't have a room available for me. So.
Y'all got protesters. I saw about at least 100 folks with yellow signs and red shirts marching around City Hall yesterday. So y'all gonna have fun tonight.
It's been a lot of fun council meetings lately in that regard.
You was talking about my toys. I see the Green Lantern is represented.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robert, you've got an interesting setup.
Oh yeah, this is my game room. This
All
just
right.
happens to be where my computer is.
Yeah.
So I've got all my nerd stuff.
All right. Nothing wrong with being a nerd. I are one.
Well, I've got an entire bookshelf dedicated to history, one to city planning, one to comic books, one to fantasy literature, and then of course a couple of guitars. So yeah, this is my nerd room.
It's your fun room.
Yeah.
There you go.
I have closet doors.
Yeah.
We did have a question came up earlier today, and I think we covered this in our planning meeting, but we were going to discuss the actual clean energy goals tonight as well.
All right.
Was that within the agenda, or?
Yeah. Ron, when we talk about the framework for the report, you were going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's 6 o'clock, but I'm hoping we get some more folks. Ron, Natalie, you want to wait a minute or two?
I think we should.
Okay.
Not many.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Just give it one more minute to let a few more people join in, and then we'll get started. Well, I'll say let's go ahead and get started now. I'm expecting a few more people to join in. I'll just go over the agenda and then turn it over to our co-chairs, Ron and Natalie. So I'm Julie Brenman with Fountainworks, and Maddie Shea is here with me. And we are at the November meeting of the Wilmington Clean Energy Task Force. Tonight's meeting, so as a reminder, we are recording the meeting. So from this point forward, anything you say will be shared on the website. We aren't going live tonight as we sometimes do because the City Council is having a meeting tonight. So tonight we'll go through the agenda, have the subcommittees review their priorities. We'll spend some time in breakout groups, looking at those priorities and allowing members of other committees to provide feedback. We'll go through the framework for the draft report, including talking about setting actual targets for the city for clean energy goals. And we'll wrap up looking at the vision statement. The final task force meeting. So you all have completed your final subcommittee meetings unless you decide tonight that you need to reconvene after this meeting. But the final task force meeting was changed to December 8th. So it's the second Tuesday in December. And that would be when we look at the final report based on all of the subcommittee reports and forward that to the City Council. I had on my notes to mention that Tom Moten is not here, but I see he's here because he has to attend the City Council meeting. So I think he's going to be here for just a couple minutes before he has to sign off. Tom, before I hand it over to Ron and Natalie, did you want to say hello? He actually looks like he's probably talking to a City Council member or the city manager right now. So we'll just say he wanted to be sure that you all knew that he is not paying attention for lack of interest, but because he has to prioritize the City Council meeting first. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ron, and I think Ron's going first.
Thank you very much. We're going to review priorities tonight. Last meeting, we got a chance to take a look at your recommendations from the subcommittees. Mayor Saffel really enjoyed his visit with us. He contacted me as well as others to express his joy at our work. I know you all have been working on your priorities. We're going to go around with the subcommittee chairs to have them report and explain why they decided to prioritize things as they did. And I'll give everybody about 5 minutes each on that, and I'll let Julie organize this process if you don't mind.
Great, thanks, Ron. So Maddie has clipped some of the highlights from the different reports and has it up on the screen. And we'll share that unless whoever's reporting out would prefer to share their own screen. And you can let us know if you want to do that. So we'll start with the Clean Energy Technology Subcommittee.
Good evening, everybody. It's
Good evening.
Ruth Smith with the Clean Energy Technology Subcommittee. We just met last night, so this is quite fresh for all of us. And I encourage other members of the subcommittee to please chime in with your areas of expertise and focus. But I'll quickly go over you all saw this last month because we really haven't made any dramatic changes. We prioritized things a little bit more. We had the benefit of seeing that matrix document before we met yesterday. And we really talked about the fact that the things that appear to be valued in that matrix document are things that we took into consideration throughout the whole process. So it sort of affirmed what we had done. We really believe, while we've sort of said this all along, there are a lot of clean energy technologies that we'd like to see pursued and explored for our community. They really aren't necessarily in the responsibility in the lane that the city. I don't know, David, you want to start generating electricity, as a city entity? Probably not. So we really were looking for opportunities for the city to be known as a technology leader, and really energy efficiency being the way they most, I'll use the same word, efficiently can position themselves on clean energy. So we really thought for the short term, it's about city operations, and it's about making sure that we've had an energy assessment done by Duke Energy, since they are our provider of electricity. And then to look toward a building management system for the city buildings. That's a pretty expensive proposition up front, but rather than a long-term cost, which was one of the things we were looking at, there's a long-term savings. And we really felt like maybe that's a good pilot project for 2022 as the budget's being put together, or maybe it's too late for that, 2023. But we really felt like, let's get started on making sure that the technology, the software is there to help make sure that the buildings are operating efficiently. Culture change, that's something that doesn't cost money. What do you create a challenge between each of the departments? How much can you save in electricity? What kind of new or different or electricity or use of fossil fuels for of any sort? Promoting a culture within the operations where all the city's employees become very energy conscious. I don't know if city buildings, I think some of them do, but do they have those light switches that turn off when you walk out of your office? Or do you have to physically turn them on and off? That's a retrofit, it costs money up front, but those are the kinds of things where we think we can see quick investment and return on the investment. And then we crossed over a little bit into some of the other groups' areas, so I apologize for that. Hope we've been open along the way. In terms of policy, making sure that all the city policies are aligned so that renewable energy technologies can be deployed. Be sure that the legislative agenda that gets put together every year includes state and federal goals that look for additional deployment of renewable energy technologies in our region. So when when you go before the legislature, there's a list of things that support perhaps availability of additional renewable energy credits, or things along those lines. And then we really believe the city has a bully pulpit it can use to help drive other partners, employers, energy users in the community to help drive them toward clean and renewable energy technologies. The schools on our, our wave transit, CFPUA, the port, the hospital, the university. We also, on our longer term goals, which I don't think are going to come up today, talk about partnerships and collaborations. And we'd love to see the university and the college put together programs where they're offering workforce development in these clean energy technologies. Let's be known. Everybody thinks of Asheville. Well, don't think of Asheville, think about Wilmington. And we also think that our location on the coast makes us prime for potentially pilot projects, grants for both resiliency for the grid, as well as, backup technologies, but also, what is the other one? I have a cheat sheet here. For grid resiliency and energy storage are the two that we think, because of our situation on the coast, we are right for. So I hope that was within my time period. Happy to answer questions, I guess, when we get our breakouts or however you want to do that.
Great, thank you, Ruth. And you noticed we're focusing more on the shorter term goals, just because those will come out as the sort of higher priority or higher emphasis to City Council. And so we'll shift to transportation and fleet.
Hi, if someone else can go next, I'm going to switch from my phone to my laptop so that I can better see everything.
Sure. All right. Policy and legislation, are you ready?
Sure. Ours was a little different since we're trying to enact policies and both at the city level and the state level. So that makes it a little trickier since we have the two subsets as far as organizing them in a sequential order. So we ended up at the end of our report, we've got an implementation timeline for the next 3 years and beyond. And so that way we can kind of reference those and kind of group it that way to make it easier to follow. But our biggest thing, which we talked about last time, is establishing a city commission for clean energy. And that way, all the work that we're doing now continues to move forward and we can adapt with the changing conditions of economics, politics, whatever changes. And that way, this isn't a static one-time thing. Everything else was kind of our priorities to start in the beginning were both things that would be easy to implement, such as adopting a city green building policy, because David's already been working on that, so it's in the process. So that's something that can be finished up soon. And then we also were prioritizing suggestions that might take some more time of trying to coordinate at the state level and getting other cities and communities involved. So that includes advocating for the Green Energy Bank, C-PACE legislation, and stuff that's on a broader scale. So that way we can get that rolling, because that's going to take some time. One of the other priorities we had, and this will bring in with the other subcommittees, is initiate planning collaboration for low-income home weatherization and energy efficiency project. I know they've discussed that also, and Duke has programs with that, so that seems like one that you can easily collaborate and move forward and have some success to then build on in the future. Then in year 2, we were looking at developing local and regional clean energy partnerships, implementing Soul Smart recommendations, promoting Duke Energy's on-bill tariffs to help city residents get energy efficiency upgrades and rooftop solar. Then also at that point, we might be able to start moving towards implementing the weatherization and energy efficiency project, and then continue at that point, see how stuff has developed, and so we can advocate for North Carolina legislation and regulations supporting stuff that the city has worked on and been successful, and what other cities have been successful. Year 3 and beyond, still working to the initial stuff in the first 2 years. If we're able to get the C-PACE program established, then explore how the city can support and promote it to local businesses. Then evaluate the feasibility of becoming a Green Source Advantage customer with Duke Energy, and then seek financing opportunities from North Carolina Green Energy Bank if that gets established statewide. And then again, continue to advocate for North Carolina level state legislation and regulations to support all the work that the city is doing. And we're really trying to, like Ruth said before, is really try and be a leader. And so based on the discussion last time where we said, and that David has it written down for the clean energy policy or building policy is LEED silver. So we, in ours, we do a minimum of silver and then explain the benefits of gold and kind of talk in with some stuff to give more information. So to know that it's pretty close where we can bump up if it's possible and not be satisfied with only doing silver. And I talked with my friend who works with Green Building Council, and she said kind of the standard, if a city's getting LEED certification, then it's pretty much silver. So that's what Durham, Raleigh, Asheville, Charlotte are doing. And so if we really want to make a name for ourselves and really show that we're taking this seriously, we can really push to do as many gold as possible.
Matt, I'm unfamiliar with CPACE.
Okay, so that's something that David has introduced in the beginning. Let me switch over. I've got all my other stuff on my work computer here while I'm in New Bern for work. So let me switch over here.
It's year 3.
Yeah, I'm just going over to like our actual document, and I'll be able to give you a lot more information on it. Let's see, that was.
I can jump in real quick if you want, Matt.
Yeah, go for it, David.
It's basically a way to finance businesses, mostly for financing energy efficiency upgrades with no cost to the business involved. So it basically lets them afford to be able to implement energy efficiency, and it basically stays with the property, no matter who may, even if the property is sold, the loan for the program and the energy efficiency benefits stay with the property. But there's actually a CPACE working group within North Carolina going on right now that we've had a number of meetings already. There's definitely a lot of movement behind it. So hopefully that's something that can get passed at the state level. But yeah, in general, it's just a way to finance energy efficiency upgrades without having to come out of pocket for it.
And the CPACE stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy.
Right.
Right.
I always have to look that up to remind myself what all the letters stand for.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, David, for helping out there. And for anyone that hasn't noticed, Dave Mays put in the chat a comment about the city buildings that already have the HVAC control systems for anyone that's interested. Kat, are you ready for transportation and fleet?
Yes.
Great.
I appreciate the time. And we also want to thank Mr. Dave Mays for meeting with us this month to give us a little bit more clarity on things that we were unclear on, quick answers, easy answers. And so we have filled out this very familiar looking matrix. So we were very pleased with that. As you can see, we've done the matrix. There are a few different footnotes in here where things are dependent on how these different processes are implemented. However, we gave them points based on what actually asking for. So basically we gave them the highest point possible based on either way that it could go. So reduced miles traveled is the most cost efficient, feasible, easiest way to make the highest impact. Basically, if everyone stopped using cars tomorrow, that would be it. It's pretty simple. That's not necessarily what's going to happen, but it's a great place to start. And the great news is that the city already has several plans in place for this to happen within the city, not necessarily directly with city fleet, but working as a community. So that kind of, I mean, I think that bodes well for this recommendation. Second would be fleet resizing, because it doesn't cost anything to reduce your fleet. It may actually hurt a few people's feelings here and there, but probably only for a year or two. And we will get past that. So that's a close second. Telematics can be used for both fleet resizing and reduced miles traveled. If you want to look a little bit more into the reduced miles traveled, you can look, there's actually an open TDM plan right now that you can comment on. But yeah, telematics will tell you, and we actually looked into the or not necessarily telematics, but the, what do you call it, odometer for the past 2 years for vehicles to see the fleet resizing. And telematics will tell you that automatically. So if a car has been sitting idle or has been used for less than 1,000 miles, maybe that's the time to actually look and do a specific fleet audit with the intention of a fleet reduction. So telematics will help with that, but not only will it help with that, it will help with making sure that our engines are running smooth and clean, and that our vehicles that need to be used in the moment are ready to go. So we obviously think that telematics, fleet resizing, and reduced miles traveled, they are so close in total numbers together that they're kind of even, but they do have a priority based on the numerical values. But when everyone thinks about how to reduce our footprint, we're probably thinking about zero emission vehicles and the infrastructure of it. And that is the future. So while these numbers are how we're basing this off of, you can't base everything off of numbers. So while we're doing this, we also need to keep in the back of our minds, zero emission vehicles are the future. This is how we're going to move in the future towards a cleaner, greener tomorrow. So maybe utilizing the other 3 recommendations for savings, cost savings, fuel savings, in cost, all those sort of things, in order to buy these zero emission vehicles and purchase the infrastructure along with grants and other things like that. So as you can see, it's a little bit complicated, but at the same time, I'm pretty pleased. I think that's obvious what our priority and what our aspirational goals will be. But feel free to reach out with any questions. And we have included a little bit of extra emphasis in most areas on how to make these equitable. Because while reducing your amount of air pollution is good for the entire community, there are a few extra steps we can take to ensure that we're helping those marginalized areas.
Great, thank you, Kat. So we have one more committee, but just you said a couple things that we'll talk about before we go into the breakout rooms. One is thank you for your model of the criteria that we adapted and used most of what you did. We added equity as another category because that is a priority for the whole committee. And Natalie will talk a little bit more, but we also agree with you that the numbers are helpful, but they don't tell you everything. And so part of what we want to do when we're talking in those subcommittees in the breakout rooms about all of this is hear, are there things that should be accounted for that weren't accounted for in that matrix? Things like quality of life or beautification or other things that are a little less tangible and quantifiable. All right, social equity and community-wide adoption.
This is Amy. I think I'm gonna take this tonight. Andrea's gonna step in if I need any help. So of course, we loved all of our recommendations. It was hard to score them. One of the things that we recognize about every one of our recommendations is that they're high touch. They're going to require a lot of staff involvement, a lot of bringing together of different groups of people, continuous engagement. And so in some regards, they're more challenging than some of the other measures that the city can look at internally, that the city may have total control over. For example, fleet decisions about the city fleet. Every one of these recommendations we've made is going to take a lot of concerted effort to bring different groups of people together and to sustain every one of these priorities. So we have scored them using the matrix that was provided. And, of course, the very top one is to commit to staffing this effort. The clean energy program generally is going to require, in our opinion, at least a full-time dedicated staff person to manage this effort. And the city will need to commit recurring resources to the implementation, whether that's an annual line item in the budget for making grant matches, but with the wide variety of stakeholders that will be involved, need to be involved to make these measures, to adopt these measures and make them successful. We do think it's going to take a long-term dedicated commitment, including probably having an ongoing committee that meets quarterly or something like that to make sure that the goal setting stays on track and the efforts stay on track, and to be able to respond as new opportunities develop. So in no particular order, the four that came up on top was encouragement of minority-owned business participation, screening new industries for disproportionate air pollution impacts on minority and low-income communities and workers, adopting heat mitigation measures, and enhancing access to low carbon and no carbon transportation and mobility options. And I think the first two on that list scored fairly well because they're less complex to implement. A lot of the activities associated with these is in the city's control. I think that kind of revealed that maybe the scoring matrix does need to have an additional scoring item, as somebody just mentioned earlier, related to quality of life or community engagement that might not be reflected in the, might not be weighted heavily enough in the scoring for our measures. The heat mitigation measures and the low carbon, no carbon transportation access, the city has a lot of control over the facilities that we recommended be addressed in these two. The other two that scored well were the backyard agriculture and composting and the neighborhood solar farms and rooftop solar. We really like the opportunities to grow the clean energy workforce, but it didn't score very well compared to some of the others because it's more complex to do that. So is home weatherization. It's going to involve a lot more stakeholder groups and a lot more sustained effort, and probably cost more, require more grant matches. So in terms of this scoring matrix, those didn't do as well, but we still think they're very much worth pursuing. Andrea, did you want to add anything? I don't know if Andrea is here with us tonight.
No, I think you did great, Amy. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So again, just phenomenally impressed with all of your work. Thank you for working on short-term, long-term goals and using the scoring matrix to help try to quantify some of that. I'll hand it off to Natalie to introduce our next segment.
Thanks, Julie. You guys I have to echo what Julie says. You guys have done a really super job, and it's impressive to see how much has gone into it. And of course, as we do this, we want to submit some easy wins to council. And we, as Julie shared, to Kat, to Amy, I'm fairly certain that Matt and Ruth will like, and all of your committee members will like to hear this, but we know that there were criteria not included in the matrix that matter. So this next section of our time together tonight is going to be us breaking into groups to look at all of the recommendations and add some extra points, if you will, some extra credit to those based on things like cost savings, beautification, quality of life impacts. We want you to get bonus points and add to the prioritization. So discuss the priorities amongst yourselves. You're not going to be in your regular subcommittees for this, and we're going to do this in breakout rooms. Julie and Maddie have us all divided up and ready to move into our breakout sessions. Julie?
Great, thanks. Maddie, do you have the room set up?
Yes, I do.
Great. So one group is going to be staying in the main room for public meeting purposes. Everyone else will be asked to join a breakout room in a minute. There will be one co-chair that will help lead the discussion, and either me, Maddie, David, or Dave will also be there to go through the discussion. So it's your opportunity to ask questions about the particular room you get randomly assigned to, and offer suggestions for bonus points for things that you think should be scored higher because something maybe wasn't accounted for.
All right. Well, I'm going to put everyone into breakouts. The group that stays here, that'll be the clean energy technology folks, but we'll see you back here in about 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so.
Yeah. All right, it looks like we're the group that stays here.
Hello again.
So Ruth, we'll be talking about what Ruth had talked about. I guess I can start with, do people have questions for the recommendations? But I don't need to lead the discussion. You guys all can discuss.
And I'll just comment that two of the members of this breakout are also on our subcommittee. So, and they're both excellent practitioners. So Robert and PJ, please participate, and if you want to add anything to what we said earlier, please feel free.
Oh, sure. So when we, so primarily when we were looking at the control software for HVAC and retrofitting the light switches and everything, I think that we had asked that question early on in the process, and it came back that it was the case that that software and the automatic light switches were not installed in a lot of the city buildings. But then come to find out there are quite a few of the larger main city buildings that are controlled automatically through lights and HVAC. So I'm not sure what happened there. but it doesn't really change our stance on retrofitting maybe some of the older buildings. But that's why we rank that so high. I think one of our main recommendations was to do the energy assessment with Duke Energy, because it doesn't cost anything and it gives you a really good benchmark for where to begin the process of, the next steps and what we're trying to accomplish. So I'll start by contributing that.
And I think that just looking at the note that David said, the police headquarters, police fire station 3 was part of their original construction. Those fire headquarters was just completed, and they're going out to bid on City Hall Pavilion shortly. So it appears that they've adopted some sort of a philosophy to do something better. I think one for me, and you guys, I don't know if everybody knows, my background's in communications and marketing and such. The city's not telling its story. So if they're doing these things, I think one of the things we really need to encourage them to do is that bully pulpit piece that I mentioned earlier. And I know one of the groups brought up hiring additional staff. That's something we've talked about as well. David needs help. He can't do this all himself.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll throw in my my few comments. That looking at the building systems controls is part of building energy efficiency, while another part is actually the equipment that's in the building. So larger buildings have chillers, boilers, and large systems. Smaller buildings have smaller systems such as those, and in even smaller buildings might even have room air conditioners out the window. Have you also looked at what kind of equipment, say building specific equipment, might be a better option?
Have we looked at like replacing some of that equipment is what you're asking? Like going with a more energy efficient option?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'm sure the city must have a lot of buildings. I've worked in different environments where there were building systems, chillers, boilers that are so old and they're just being maintained. But when I did the research and looked into it, you could replace some of those large pieces of equipment with modern efficient equipment, and the payback would be under 5 years. That kind of thing. Has that been part of your recommendations?
I don't think we were, and correct me, Robert or PJ, we weren't specific on what type of equipment they need to look at. We just felt like they needed to really work on generally utilizing these building management systems so that they can monitor all that different equipment. So I think we didn't mean to be exclusive in saying just HVAC equipment. It's really the whole operation of a building, as well as the monitoring and reducing energy need draw as much as it can.
Right, which begins to get into the policy aspect of it, which is where we would segue into the policy aspect with the policy subcommittee.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not just HVAC. It's everything from HVAC to lighting to even door alarms, right? So somebody leaves a door cracked to the outside environment, and that's allowing cold air to come through. We were saying we need to evaluate our buildings to understand how to efficiently utilize our buildings, and building management systems will be, when you implement a building management system, you have to do all this analysis and studying in order to figure out what you have first, your baseline, to get to where you want to be the most efficient. You know, I mean, it could be even windows. I mean, windows over time degrade and the insulation value goes down, and allows heat or cool air through it. So I mean, it's a complete evaluation of our buildings.
Right.
And then the people inside the building. So is the culture that when you leave at the end of the night, you turn down your computer, or do you leave it on? Right? Assuming we go back to working in buildings on a regular basis.
We're never going to be in another building again. It's all work from home now. Yeah, I don't know.
I would think the Duke Duke efficiency assessment would look at all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
And that's why it's a great place to start. I mean, we didn't have enough time to actually begin that process as a subcommittee, or probably even a committee. It would be something that staff would have to initiate, obviously, and then from there go with sort of go back to the drawing board on which needs to be replaced immediately, which is why we start getting into some of the behavioral curving technology, as opposed to what to replace and when. I mean, I can guarantee you it'll probably end up being like an end of life cycle for a piece of equipment, and then upgrade, based off the recommendations. And that'll probably be something that Duke tells you in that evaluation, in the efficiency assessment.
Yeah.
So.
Paul, does that give you any comfort?
Sorry, what?
Paul, is it all of this discussion answering your initial question?
I don't know. I wasn't on the committee, so I can't speak to that, but I spent many years in building design and engineering, heavy on HVAC systems. And it used to be that HVAC was the #1 user of building energy by far. Lighting was next. Now that has changed dramatically. If you just screw out the old bulb that you got, no matter what it is, throw it away and put an LED, lighting drops down, way down on the list. But again, go with what you got. I have no idea what Duke will do for you. They're not in the business to conserve energy. They want to sell energy, but it could be that they have.
Well, that's not completely true.
Okay.
They do have energy efficiency programs. I mean, yes, you're right. They're a regulated utility. They're in the business of making money, but they also are trying to be environmentally friendly. And I've had energy audits done before at different facilities. So while you're right, it does take money out of their pocket. At the end of the day, it's not something they don't do. They have a whole team of auditors that do this.
Well, I understand that. I'd be curious to see if they advise for a lot of HVAC improvements. Anyway, I think that's the lowest hanging fruit with the best payback. Even though it's expensive gear, it's not cheap. You're probably going to have some extra help with an engineer to decide if that's the right thing to do. I mean, you've got bigger buildings with boilers and chillers, and these are tens of thousands of dollars of improvements, but paybacks can be pretty quick, especially if it's old equipment that's being used now. Yeah, good luck.
Andy, do you have any questions?
Not questions per se, but I think it's interesting that as groups come together like this, we see similarities. The city has to tell their story better. There needs to be more attention paid to it. That it's not a one-person job. It's a team, but it's also interesting to hear the combination of technology and culture. And I used to be sometimes the last person in the building I worked at, and going around turning off lights at the end of the day, and turning, how we did window shades, even things like that were, and this is going back a decade, so the technology is very different now, but how your behavior plays a big role in using the technology. Otherwise, technology is great, but if you're not letting it do what it's supposed to do, then it's kind of a waste of money. And we probably all do these things at home already. Turn it off. My dad used to say, turn off when not in use. Turn off the juice. Turn off the light when you're done with going home for the night. And just how that gets rolled down through the city.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I know Maddie sent a note that we're almost done. The idea of bonus points or elevating any of these recommendations that you thought didn't get enough attention for things like quality of life, some of the more intangible things, when you heard that idea, did any of this strike you as or any of the things that maybe aren't your short-term goals strike you as something that should be elevated or paid a little extra attention to?
Well, the longer term goals, we really looked at partnerships and collaboration and exploration. Those were the three categories. And I don't know that y'all remember this from last week, but again, collaborating with Duke Energy on the deployment of some of the renewable technologies they're doing. We did do some research. There really, within the city limits, is not feasibility for a solar farm. We don't have room for it, among other things. But there is the ability to potentially come up with a regional program where we put some solar facilities out in, say, Brunswick County or Pender County, in a more rural area. But it's a collaborative relationship regionally for the community. We really like the idea of grid resiliency and energy storage pilot projects. And again, those are things that could get funded through federal, state grants or others, public partnerships. We really felt it was important that the big users of energy, the city can't, I guess it could try, but it's not in the business of mandating energy reduction for the private sector, but it certainly can set the standard and talk about it and talk about how important it is to our community. So those are the things we were talking about, and we'd be really disappointed if we didn't see an energy goal in the city's legislative priorities for next legislative session and congressional session. And by saying goal, I want to be specific. It's not like a reduction in, it's not X% or anything. It's some energy policy, I should say, and energy policy supporting renewable energy or advanced technologies, I guess I would say, advanced clean energy technologies.
I think we're going to get shut down any second now, but any other comments? You guys mentioned cost savings, right? That was something that really wasn't in our ranking matrix, but a lot of what you're proposing would be cost savings.
Yeah, a lot of things either are cost neutral or will drive savings down the road.
Yeah. So it sounds like nothing is of concern to those that aren't on the committee, and the committee members that are in here are comfortable with what you all came up with. Ruth, do you want to do the quick report out when we meet back as a full group, or does someone else want to volunteer?
Anybody else? Robert, do you want to do it? Nobody's tired of hearing from me.
Never.
Or PJ?
Oh, I didn't know everyone was back.
You guys hear us debating?
Sorry, I didn't, since I was sharing my screen, I didn't see that everyone was back. Hopefully we weren't talking for too long. So we want to hear from each room. I'll start with my room. Robert, did you get volunteered?
Oh no.
I think it's called voluntold, isn't it?
You just want me to recap what we were talking about?
Yes.
Going over the technology aspect of it, we were just talking about, again, a good place to start being with the efficiency assessment from Duke Energy, looking at the efficiency of what Paul brought up, looking at the efficiency of the larger buildings, HVAC systems, and how the payoff might actually be pretty short if you replace like a really old chiller or boiler with newer technology, things like that. We went over the fact that, we just don't have, the city of Wilmington just doesn't have the footprint to build its own solar farm. Look at my notes here. I think we went over most of it in our original presentation and just discussed some of the finer points for the most part. It would have been beneficial to the conversation early on. Months ago, if we had known that a lot of the retrofit had already been at least initiated with at least the switches and the software to control the the environment in the buildings. But of course, it's not a huge game changer for my recommendations because it's not complete or in all buildings, so it'll still make a difference. So I don't know, Ruth, what did I miss?
You captured most of it. Julie took the notes, so maybe she's got something else we missed that's obvious. But I think we all also talked about the fact that the city needs to embrace all of this, from a commitment in staff resources to behavioral modifications across the board of city employees, et cetera. And I think really take advantage of the opportunity to tell their story and to tell it early and often, and encourage others to come along with them.
I think a lot of it, going where policy and technology sort of meet, is changing the culture. And I know that New Hanover County does a great job with shifting culture. So when they adopted their last strategic plan for the county, I know that like their policy statement or whatever was like on every screensaver in the county buildings, on every computer, just something.
You're welcome. My team developed those.
Yeah. So like that's one thing. That's you can change culture, and culture will say, and a changing culture will save you a lot of energy. Just making people more efficient. But anyway, I digress.
That's great. How about the room that was talking about transportation and fleet?
So Julie, that might have been us. We had transportation co-chair and policy co-chair, so we just kind of did a hybrid thing. So I'm not sure if you're referring to our group or not.
Sure.
We talked about everything.
Yeah.
Let's hear from you then, Matt, your room.
Most of the stuff that we kind of talked about was making sure that this is a living document. And so we were discussing like our initial thing of having a city commission for clean energy, and Ron was talking about that it would really be like it's going to need to be a staff position that can be in all the meetings, keep this stuff in the minds of city management, city council. And so we were trying to come up with a kind of a hybrid because there might not be enough room in the budget to hire someone initially to do this. And so instead of just loading all of this onto someone who probably already has a very full plate of stuff to do with the city, if we have someone that's a city staff member who would report to the city manager, then there can still be a group of people that are appointed or volunteers or something to help do the legwork and to kind of build the momentum. And then as budgets, city budgets are moved forward, and you can plan for that and account for it after we're getting these successes, I think that's a good thing to make sure all of our ideas and recommendations move forward. And then Kat brought up a lot of this is innovation, and we talked about the fact that we are a tourist area. So any of these projects that's going to be kind of new and exciting, that kind of we can hang our hat on and talk about when all these people visit, that's a good thing to help spread that message on, but then also to kind of think how some of our projects are then going to impact longer term kickbacks as far as maintaining the natural beauty and what draws people here to begin with. And so even though we might be putting upfront costs, there's going to be a payback for that eventually by maintaining a healthy environment and for people to continue to want to come to. And so that's a big cost benefit in the future that might be hard to calculate, but it's important to keep that in mind.
Great. Dave, were you going to add something? Dave Mays.
Who? Hello?
No, I just think, I didn't see your notes about which group we were supposed to chair, and I think I got plopped into the wrong one. Either way, we had a good conversation.
All right, how about the room that David Ingram was in, whatever you guys talked about?
I took a few notes. This is Kenny. I'd be happy to summarize that. Since I'm going after Matt, I'll just kind of start with something that he was talking about that we also discussed was looking forward to what kind of staffing and positions we're going to need for this. Of course, we had David in our room, and he's kind of picking up a lot of duties that have to do with this, rightfully so for right now. But as things progress, it's going to require a lot more manpower, which is what Matt was summarizing from his group as well. And he mentioned volunteers. We kind of thought considering the advocacy potential and sort of grassroots partnerships that could grow from some of these recommendations. Molly was talking about that her subcommittee mentioned that on the matrix there was considering costs, but that it would be really important to also consider the long run benefits as well. There really didn't seem to be which I think Andrea mentioned in a chat, like how hard it is to quantify certain things. And that would be one thing that might be a little bit more challenging to quantify, but I think giving it a standard sort of 1, 2, 3 on level of benefits could be pretty beneficial. And same with looking at the human health effects for some of these and how some of these long-term some of the changes that the clean energy could take would be considered in the long-term human health effects. And then Ed was talking about bringing up the importance in one of our policy recommendations of the Green Building Council, and that there is a LEED for cities and communities certification program. So that got us maybe thinking about a score or some sort of line in a matrix to consider grant opportunities or like there's money out there for for things like this. So what are those opportunities? Are they available? And it might take a little bit of research. It might take a little bit of digging. And I think that's how we got into, we need somebody to do that job. So just sort of looking at what money is out there that could be attainable for something like this. That's it.
I think the manpower aspect of it could be solved if we just, work David harder. And Ron is an engineer. He could pitch in with all his skills and save a whole bunch of money.
I think I heard last night Bill's willing to intern for the city in the sustainability office, actually.
Well, as far as the manpower is concerned, leads are concerned, I haven't heard anything that's relatively short term that is staggering in costs. Lead costs a little more, but it's not. It's really the same order of magnitude as just the building we build now. A lot of it is just design. With a new building, you pick up a lot of these points, lead points from design. And you pay a little more along the way for that little extra, electronic gear and this, that, and the other. But what my biggest concern is we're a clean energy group. And I think we need to, get behind the big idea of the long term of what's going to get us to a city that runs on clean energy to the greatest extent possible. Now, as far as cost is concerned, to establish a solar farm here or buy into one somewhere else or to establish a wind farm, the initial cost or, compact nuclear reactor, the initial cost is huge. And I don't think that the city's ever going to be able to finance it. It's too big a risk. And we'd have to hire all sorts of experts to put together a complicated design program for any of these. And I keep bringing it up, but I feel like Duke has got the expertise to advise us. If they establish a wind farm for you or add on to another wind farm and give you credits for it, you don't lay out any cash to speak of except rent, cost of power. And the question is, does the power cost you more than it does now? The same or less? I don't know, but I think they know.
Natalie, so we have one more subcommittee or one more breakout room to hear from, but Natalie, you had, after the last meeting, had a conversation with Duke. Now might be a good time to just share that with everyone.
Sure. I think David brought up at our last meeting when I suggested engaging Duke a little more, Bill. David suggested that they might not be ready by the time we finish, and they're not. There was somebody at Duke who had insinuated that maybe they would, and when he ran everything up the flagpole, he found that they're not going to be ready until January, and so they are actually quite interested in our recommendation around a longer term advisory council or whatever it turns out to be called around clean energy. And they do want to be a partner with the city of Wilmington and how we reach and attain our aspirational goals. So I think it's a stay tuned. They're just not ready yet to share some things that they'll be ready in a couple of months to share. And I think they'll be really good partners. David, would you add anything?
I'd like, go ahead, David.
I'd add that, what they're trying to get ready through is this IRP process, their integrated resource plan. Julie and Maddie, you guys are aware just from some of the other Zoom meetings we've all been on here lately, is that we actually have the opportunity as a city to comment back on the integrated resource plan, both referencing what I hope will be our new clean energy goals to Duke, and commenting that we would really like to see them take steps to ensure that their plan is taking into account our city's goals. So, and this is, I mean, we were on a call today with multiple cities from across North Carolina who are all at least looking at opportunities to provide comments back to the IRP. And, you know, a good point was brought up that not only is each city, you know, big users of Duke Energy, but we also represent an enormous part of the population from across the state. So as a group, we really have a great opportunity to perhaps influence the IRP in a significant way.
Yeah, thanks.
Would council be disappointed in us if we explain the situation to them about we've encountered some delays beyond our control that are integral to our recommendations? You know, the December date was established. You know, it's like all dates, you know, they're somewhat arbitrary. Plus we're entering the holidays and shortly, and nobody's going to be too much interested in reading reports, I don't think. You know, can we wait on this Duke report? See what they got?
Bill, I think there's another component that needs to be also added into that of the variable of this equation. And David, I'm sure you're aware of. It's going to be one thing that's going to be interesting starting the year is what is the legislative sessions are going to look like.
Ron?
Oh, I was chiming in that I think we got enough meat on the bone to make a presentation to council. Without the Duke, we can talk about Duke in this world, but they're not going to be integral to what we're reporting in on. Duke is a nice, what I want to call it, a nice benefit, but it's not mission critical for our report.
Yeah, and
I agree, Ron, but I think it would be real important for us to, as we do make our report to the city, is to be sure to let them know of Duke's posture. Kat just put an article in about how they've been recognized again as being most sustainable. You know, they're very committed to helping, and I think if we can make that part of our message to the city council, is that they need to be a partner in this. They're setting forth, you know, through the IRP that's already out, just through the regular reporting that they're doing. They want to be a full partner with the city of Wilmington as they move forward. And I think that message we should carry. They've, and I'm sure you got the same thing, Natalie, they've offered to come, you know, brief the city council at the appropriate time, et cetera. So I think if we just sort of tee it up, we as a subcommittee have used their community relations person pretty extensively as we were developing our recommendations, because we knew technology we couldn't do ourselves. We had to talk to them.
So what you're saying is to go ahead and give a report with a caveat. No, I think that's fine. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to extend our job because I need the paycheck.
Well, Bill, I think we identified your next job is interning in the city office of sustainability. But I do, Ron, I would agree with Ruth's points, but we are making a recommendation to council about a longer term advisory group that some or all of us may sit on, but so should Duke. I think that's what Ruth is trying to share. And what I would advocate for is that we make sure council knows in that recommendation that for us to truly hit these aspirational goals that we're going to talk about next, after we finish this section of the agenda, we can't do that simply with the recommendations we all have listed in this report and the ones that have bubbled to the top, because we're giving them the easy wins for the most part, and those aren't going to help us get where. So Bill, I think we're all in agreement that the easy wins, the top line recommendations shouldn't be our forever end of report, we're done.
So just in the interest of time, that was a good discussion. I want to hear from the last breakout room that I think was talking about the social equity and community outreach. And then we'll talk a little bit about the report, the big level goals, and what should be in the report. So the social equity breakout room.
Amy, are you still?
Yes, I'm still here.
Can you share a little bit about what you all talked about in your breakout room? Any feedback you got?
I think just generally that there might be some opportunities to add some additional scoring criteria so that better give some of these things that everyone seemed to think were pretty important an opportunity to score more highly. Anybody else who was in that room want to add anything?
I think specifically the two things we talked about were weatherization, because we're aware of some grant dollars that are going to communities for better sustainability and resiliency after storms. That certainly will have weatherization included in those. It's federal grant dollars. Secondly, on the workforce, we think that some points should be given to that item because of the positive impact on our economy that will come from better developing the workforce and opening their eyes to the opportunity to work in clean energy jobs. And then finally, this is a minority report. Nobody in the room said they agreed with me, but is that I do have a concern that one of the items from social equity doesn't belong in our report because it's about air quality and not clean energy. And that's the one that has to do with the recruitment of companies and how we will judge, the city will judge recruitment of companies. And I don't think that item is in our purview personally.
I think we disagree, but we're here to give our recommendations, and ultimately somebody whoever's in charge of this will decide which ones to implement. We do think it's in our charge, in our purview, but we stand by it.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm not sure. What was that recommendation?
This was related to acknowledging the legacy impacts from past greenhouse gas emissions here, past emissions from the Duke's operations as a coal-fired energy producer. And there was some pretty significant air emissions during that period of time that probably had some impacts on the community's health and may have some legacy impacts on the community's health. And we think it's an important part of clean energy to look at attracting clean industries to the community that are not going to add any more to the air pollution burden in the community. We think that's an important social equity, social justice.
Good point. What we're looking at here is the bottom line is to eliminate gases escaping into the atmosphere.
The city has a greenhouse gas reduction goal already. I'd rather see our report and our recommendations look forward and not back, in the sense that you're looking at things that occurred in the past. Clearly we were ranked, what did it say on the front page of the paper today? We're one of the top, tech-friendly cities in the country. The chances of us attracting large industrial in the city of Wilmington, large industrial customers that are going to be adding to air emissions are somewhere between slim and none. Your bigger issue is transportation. It's the people who are going to drive to those jobs. So I'm not sure that necessarily belongs here. But I don't assume it was one of your top priorities. I don't know where we are.
Ashley?
The city county.
Bill, I'm going to let Ashley jump in.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused as to why there is any pushback around this being included. If the city chooses not to prioritize it, they choose not to prioritize it. But the push that it not be included is confusing to me. There's no way that we can not connect clean energy to air quality.
So I
And
don't
like,
disagree with you that they're connected.
I wasn't done. I wasn't finished. Also to the comment about like looking forward and not looking back, the reason that, and I know this was a while ago, but the reason that we almost had Titan Cement here, which would have been one of the 5th largest cement companies in the nation, is because we didn't have any clear priorities around not bring that here. So one of the surest ways to do that is to put things like what our committee is suggesting into place. Okay, so I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't disagree that that conversation ought to happen somewhere. I just don't think it belongs in the charge that we were given to provide recommendations to the city for how we can improve greenhouse gases going forward. I hear you loud and clear, Amy and Ashley and anybody else who's on that subcommittee. It's just not part of this charge. I'm not arguing that it shouldn't be discussed as a priority for the city, but not as a clean energy task force.
I just want to point out with due respect to each party that energy purchasing is a part of your greenhouse gas inventory as scope 2. And so, you know, looking back and recognizing is an important part, and recognizing the way we're moving forward is also an important part in benchmarking. So I think both parties are right, but it certainly is a part of it.
So I don't think we're done with this conversation, but I know we have a few other things to cover and we've got 12 minutes left. So Ron, I'm going to shift it to you for a few minutes to talk about the report.
I was enjoying the conversation. We'll have to get into it a little more. One thing that we need to be thinking about, and I got my little bullet points here about in the beginning report, we want to include some aspirational goals, and we need to distinguish between the city operations and community-wide goals. And the recommendation that we have so far is that we go with 100% of total electricity consumed from the city operations from clean energy sources by 2050, and 50% of our fleet operations with clean energy. And another bullet point I got here is 50% of electrical consumption in the community at large. Now, this is a goal to be from clean fuels by 2050. There are things already in the pipeline in the community. If you drive around the countryside here now, you got solar farms popping up like mushrooms everywhere. So there's some movement from Duke Energy and private sector. There's money to be made in solar farms. Sadly, I don't own one yet, but that's the kind of goal we're looking at. And that'll be at the front end of the report, because that's one of the things that one of the questions that the mayor wanted to answer when he called me months ago. What should the city's goal be in 2050? And we want to push that out now. Is what we want to put at the beginning of the report. Julie, I'm gonna pass back off to you.
So Ron, I'm just going to ask you to repeat it.
All right. Oh, thank you so much.
The 100%.
100% total electricity consumption from city operations will be from clean energy sources by 2050. That's the goal. And then 50% of the fleet to be using clean energy. So that's the buildings and all, then secondarily, the fleet operations. And then as another side for the community goal, 50% of community electricity consumption to be from clean sources by 2050.
So what Ron was just sharing is the thinking that we would have at the beginning of the report, these goals, and then what's on the screen in addition to the goals is an outline of what would be included in the report. So acknowledgements, table of contents, executive summary, introduction, some data, and then the target renewable energy. Maddie wrote on the Post-it notes there, some information about the public surveys, and then recommendations from each of the subcommittees, and appendices with a glossary. David Ingram had shared a glossary way back when. So we wanted input from all of you on, in part, those goals. Anything else you think should be in the report that David's going to be working on over the next couple of weeks before our next meeting, and anything that you know of that should be in the glossary or anywhere else. So I'd first open it up for any feedback on those target goals.
I have a question. Are we not going to have any intermediate goal, like a 2030 or 2035 goal? And then also I would just comment that these goals aren't very aspirational based on what other cities have.
Julie, I want to take it a step back for a second. When I heard Ron read it, it was clean energy, not renewable energy. You have 6 is target renewable energy goals. I think we need to be clear on what it is we are talking about.
Yeah,
he was specific, and we have as a committee been very specific of talking about clean energy goals.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's what we got, clean energy sources.
I would also,
which is consistent with Duke Energy's message as well.
Yeah. I can't comment on the 100% of city operations being clean energy sources. Again, we kind of joke about this. You can't separate the electrons that are on the grid. You don't know where they came from, right? We can encourage policies that drive 100% clean energy. I personally don't believe we as a city can say our operations will be 100% with clean energy. Aspirational goal, sure. Someday that would be awesome. Is 2050 the day that awesomeness can come into place? I don't know. I'm not, I'm not one that predicts that kind of thing. So I personally think it's great as an aspiration. Do I think that's something we should put forward publicly as our recommendation? I'm not there yet.
Well, it's like putting the carrot in front of the horse or the donkey as you're trying to lead them on. It gives them a goal. If you make the goal too shy, they'll get halfway there. If you're reaching for,
Ron, to your point, the technology is just not out there yet. And even Duke Energy in their IIRP document says future technology in out years, and they left it at that because it's an unknown.
Well, it's unknown, but we need to have a goal that really inspires. If we fall short of 100% in 2050, and we fall in at 50%, 70%, that's still good. We just won't have. If the technology doesn't keep up with our aspirations, if you remember, well, y'all not old enough to remember when they announced the moonshot. Everybody in the room back in '61 or whatever that was when Kennedy got up and spoke. That can't happen. We never get to the moon. It was such a high goal, but the people were motivated to achieve it. So that's the reason I'm supporting the high goal to give our citizens, our city government, really, this is really for the city government, a target that they will, man, how are we going to get to do that? Now, as you mentioned already, technology is not completely in place today. And as you know, just from the rampant increase in cell phone technologies and electronics, we may not perceive something today, and then in month 5, month 6, suddenly, hey, somebody's come up with that. So anyhow, I don't want to sell short the ability of folks to come up with technologies that help us achieve this by not putting it out there as that was 25th, a 30-year out goal for the city to try to work toward. But this is a committee, so talk to me.
Yeah, so my thing is, if you put 100% out there and it's an aspirational goal and you really, really want to get there, if we get down to the end date, 2023 or 2030 or 2050, and we're 94%, I don't want anyone to say, well, you know, you're a failure. Well, no, I mean, we just couldn't get there because it's just not possible. I mean, 94 is a lot better than where we are today. Today we're probably in the neighborhood of about, today we're in the neighborhood, and I shared this with our subcommittee yesterday, you know, from a clean energy perspective on what's coming off of Duke's grid, we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 to 60% clean energy as it is today. So, you know, 40% is where we have to close the gap. And 40%, if we're able to get, you know, another 35% of that or 45% of that and not quite get to 100%, I don't want anyone to look back and say, well, you know, you got 94%, you are a failure, because that's not fair. I mean,
PJ
it's
and
just,
Ruth,
it's just not possible.
PJ, would it help to add something, you know, a caveat that in those bullets that says something like technology allowing, so that it gives us the grace if the technology doesn't get here, but we still have this aspirational goal. I mean, I think Beth thinks it's not aspirational enough, so want to make sure we're kind of trying to figure out how do we meet in the right place.
Well, I like the idea of having a slight caveat, technology permitting, that I can't imagine anybody in 30 years looking back at our little committee calling us a failure, because they probably won't remember me or any of us from back here, but they would have our report. And if you were telling me that Duke is already achieving 40% now, I think that's a good sign that a higher out goal would be useful. And put the caveat in there about technology permitting. That'll be, make it real fine print. Little asterisk stuck in the back corner. So it's something that if you feel uncomfortable putting your neck out there that far, do it that way.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Ron, don't you want any intermediate goal? Because, you know, 30 years is a long time for a planning horizon. A lot of cities have 2030 or 2035 intermediate, like some percentage, just as 30 years is so long.
You want to give us a number? I mean, a year to look at?
2035, what would it? That's halfway through.
I mean, I think we should partially align with what Duke Energy is already trying to achieve. So they have a 2030 goal and they have a 2050 goal.
Okay.
What does that 2050 goal look like?
I believe it's 100%.
It is.
In 30 years, if somebody stands up and starts criticizing, I'm going to leave a letter. Release at that time with my opinion of what they're belly aching about.
I love it.
It's 7:30 now, so I know some people have to jump off. We wanted to also, we sent this out. We made some changes to the vision statement based on the feedback last month. And Natalie, did you want to say anything about that? All right, you're on mute, but you look like you're saying it's good.
Good, thanks.
I'm gonna just do the closing announcements, but folks that want to stay on and talk more about the goal, the vision, or any other matters, we can. So we do have our next meeting December 8th, and David will be working on the draft report and getting it to everyone before the meeting. Do you have a target date, David? Not to put you on the spot.
Before the next meeting.
Long enough before the next meeting so folks can read it.
Yes.
Let's see, yeah, so we will finalize the report at the next meeting. send it to the city council as a staff report from the committee, and then it wouldn't get presented until council to council until January. So the committee, the plan is that the work will be done in December, but you all would be invited to come to the council meeting in January. Ron or Natalie, anything else before we adjourn?
Just thanks everyone for all of your work.
Thank you for all your hard work. I'm really impressed. Where we are now is not where I thought we would be back when we started. I did not have I didn't have high hopes for this team, but I didn't know where we would be. But this many people doing everything on Zoom instead of face to face. But this is good.
Great, thank you. So I'll officially adjourn. I think there's a few little loose ends. Molly, I noticed, I just want to ask you, the committees address the advocacy for the policies and adding the position. What do you mean? Can we add that? Because that's in recommendations, right?
I'm sorry. I was looking at the document and I probably missed it. For the policy section and the things that we were going to implement. Everybody talked about partnerships, and I saw that had its own little blurb, but all of us, I feel, talked about advocacy and making sure that there's somebody present with the city of Wilmington, whether it's a paid position or not, to make sure and push through what we've worked so hard here to accomplish, to make sure that things actually happen.
Gotcha.
That's all.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I've got to leave. Carry on.
Night, Ron.
Anyone else that wants to stay? I'm happy to stay. Or any other conversations?
Well, happy Thanksgiving, and be safe too.
Yes, thank you.
Amen.
Yep. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Take care.
Yes. Stay healthy.
Julie, I have a quick question if you have time to stay on.
Yes.
Yeah, I just have some curiosity about the process. I think I had the understanding that the wisdom of the group would be submitted before council. What is the structure as far as decision making?
In terms of what goes into the report?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. David, I'd let you lead, but my impression is that we would have the subcommittee reports intact in there, so they would be included in full. And then in terms of summarizing high level information, David would be pulling from those reports. Is that what you're planning, David?
Yeah, that's how I'm approaching it now, is to include all of the recommendations from subcommittees for the draft. And as we come together for our next meeting, we'll just have it out there for comment, edits, thoughts, and it'll go through another revision, I imagine, and as many as we need before we need to present it to council. So
thank you.
Yeah, I had one comment. Sorry, I thought PJ was going to stick on, but I mean, he said we looked at, I guess he had been provided Duke Energy's energy mix, and like he said earlier, it was 50% roughly for clean energy from nuclear. So I think one of the goals was to get to 50% for all of Wilmington. So I think we need to raise that bar. I know we were thinking more about lowering the 100% recommendation, but I think we need to increase the 50% for community-wide, unless I'm missing something.
No, you're not missing anything. It's just, deadlines and percentages stay the flux all the time.
Yeah, I would just say, though, if we're already at 50%, that's not really too much of a goal. But
I thought he said 40.
It's mandated that
Well, yesterday it was 50. You know, I don't know. Someone else look into it. Has some time.
California has mandated that there'll be no fossil fuel vehicles on the road after, at least California registered vehicles on the road after 2030. It's 10 years off.
Yeah.
That's pretty bold.
David, do you know off the top of your head what the answer is of where Wilmington currently is
I mean,
community-wide?
considering nuclear in that clean energy mix, I'd have to look at the latest mix from Duke, but yeah, it's in that 40% something range, with somewhere around 5% of that clean being solar or other.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the biomass, I think it was 1% as well.
They've got a few that are 1% or less part of the mix.
So even if it is at 40%, 50% isn't that big of a goal by 2050.
Yeah. Yeah, we can probably, maybe we can put it out there in